Hello hero, it's Lucy Lannon. It's good to see you. You've seen the title, so at this stage you know more about today's reading than I do, since I speak to you from the recent alternate past. This is a general, timeless one, ideally designed for quite a large audience, so we won't get as specific as we would in a private booking, link down below. If most of what I'm saying feels like an answer to a question you've been living, take those tidbits with you and let a fellow traveller excavate the rest. If it's not your reading, there are playlists on my channel hub to randomise finding something else. Whilst it's true that a broken clock is right twice a day, I'm not sure that same clock is right 10 times within the hour. So trust yourself, above all, to know what's useful for you and what makes you feel more empowered for hearing it, no matter what your beliefs. While we're on beliefs, on this channel gendered terms are just a specificity of language to describe energetic tendencies and signatures, solar or lunar inclination in accordance with a hermetic law of polarity, and not any kind of socialisation to buy into wholesale or conflate with the identity or orientation of anyone described. Romantic and spiritual labels used are plucked from lengthy precedent predating any unfortunate trending controversies or engineered cyclical backlash. My dude, around these parts, we don't relinquish the complexity of our full histories. We trust ourselves cognitively to adapt what we consume and see what's healthy and long-term accurate. I'm legally obliged to say this is entertainment in quote marks and that I'm an occultist not qualified in unrelated disciplines to advise on physical and mental health, finances, legalities. You get the picture, you're in charge of you. All my readings are protected and warded by frankly magnificent beneficial forces, though I don't share my custom prep rituals on camera any more than I give out my address. I hope the reasoning behind that is obvious, but you can trust there are zero parasitic or adversarial influences permitted within 100 unseen paces of any signal we patch from the noise here today. So sit back, relax into the shape of your most luminous possible future self, cozy up to imaginal allies, and take in whatever it is you need to hear. If you do like it, this small channel with a big mission very much appreciates subscriptions, thoughtful comments, or donations in order to spread the word and keep the lights on. Now, let's tune that dial. Okay, apologies if there's any sound difference. I know last time was a little bit fuzzy and I'm not entirely sure why, so let me know in the comments if it's not to your liking and I will adjust mic setup, but that may have even been unique to the last scenario. There will also be a slight buzzing just as some kind of vapour comes out of this light back here. Let me check that's on camera. It is. That's just to cleanse the space and kind of keep me in the vibe of things while there's ambient sound going on that you can't hear. Okay. I struggled with whether to use the archetype deck today or whether to go with the Black Moon Astrological, and I'm glad I went with this because it led me in very easily to the rest of the reading. And it is quite a straightforward, coherent reading, even if it might take a little while to unpack. But I was told not to use the archetypes because the archetype I would need was the detective. And I went, oh, okay. That's very straightforward to let me know in advance. Perhaps if I remember, we'll get the book later, or I'll put that in the comments section what the Caroline Mace interpretation of the archetype is. But I was told it was detective, and then the looping kind of earworm song that was channeled for today was Empty by the Cranberries, which I used to sing a great deal in uni, annoying my best friend of 18 years. And that fits in with the detective, because we used to joke that we had a detective agency, which has since evolved into an astrological detective agency. Guess who the astrologer is, right? And this was to do detective work of all different kinds. Think of like the Butterfield Detective Agency and how crap it is. So there was like that at the polar end of the joke on one end, and then at the other end, we were genuinely finding stuff out through social media and possibly getting a little bit stalky when necessary for ethical purposes in order to extract facts, figure out what people's motivations were with each other, and generally help the people around us, and indeed help our own love lives in order to vet people before we did anything so sullying to the day as going on a date with a stranger. I mention all of this because the combination of detective and that song points to that behaviour. So there is an element here of somebody spying on someone else online or astrologically or indeed through tarot, but I think it's probably more than that if you're here and you're seeing this today. Now, I don't know whether that's you looking at them or them looking at you, but I can tell you for most people this is a love reading, and if not, it's a reading about the perception from your end of a rejection and how it is that you're coming to terms with that, and whether or not it is that you feel you can forgive or do the work or whatever, and how it's affecting your life, really. I don't feel that there's going to be a kind of assessment outcome. I mean, maybe we'll get that in the extra divination method, because I will do like an ink in water reading as well. Stay tuned. But we're not so much looking into the direction of that relationship as your position within this dynamic and what was legitimately going on. We are being the detectives here today, which is very much tarot energy. In fact, I think on my shop banner, the detective card comes up along with Exorcist and a few other things. It is very much this vibe of like the channel, not just this reading. But something to bear in mind there is with detective, we always have, we can see it very affectionately in this kind of Columbo way, but there's also this element of subterfuge and knowing more than another party, or indeed knowing more than you are permitted to know sometimes. And many times that is to aid in legal investigation, i.e. investigations of a spiritual nature that are above board. And many other times someone is independently hired to look at the affairs of somebody else, literal or figurative, and they wouldn't have that person's permission to look into those things, which is why an investigation is required. I say all this because I want you to grapple with, if you're at the end doing the detective work, is it for good reason? Is it because you can't bear to release a connection and therefore you're kind of tugging on someone's energy, which absolutely fine, by the way. That's part of the process for some of you. It's not that I'm demonizing it, it's that I'm putting it out, right? Or is it perhaps that you know that this person wouldn't be transparent with you, so you feel you are entitled to information that they wouldn't freely give you, which becomes another thing, right? Very difficult, very different ethical setup there. Or are you doing the sort of above board detective thing and saying, I can't get this information directly because this person is in concealment or closed off about their motives or their emotions or whatever, but I know that this information is freeing and for the good of all or the benefit of a specific other person. So I'm extracting it from that reasoning. And examine that. If you are the person that it is good for in terms of the development of your journey, I want you to listen to what I'm going to say about everything else and then ask yourself again at the end of the reading, is it good for me though? Because I feel like if you're finding information out about a person, maybe for somebody else, or if you're even at this reading and it concerns someone that you know, maybe, that's very different to, well, I think it's for my greater good and I feel that spirit is confirming that, so I'm going to continue to potentially go over somebody's boundaries digitally or in person, or just kind of find out stuff that they're not telling me. And I know that's a really tricky territory, especially if, for example, you were ghosted or this kind of perceived rejection was a short, sharp stop, you know. It becomes then very difficult to move on without getting some form of answer or closure. But I still want you to just let it percolate. Like, are you the detective? Are they the detective? Why are either of you doing those things? Who does it benefit? Who potentially suffers from it? And if the shoe was on the other foot, would it be the same way, right? Okay, so having said that, second house, owning. And it's in reverse. So I got the song You Don't Own Me. But more than that, I actually feel this is less of a monetary thing and more about value systems, right? It's the Taurus house. It's often financial, but it's also just about things you have. Things that you identify as possessing, whether they be people, qualities, or assets, right? And qualities is a big one, because all the way through the tarot, which I got sort of pointed to straight after this, there's like, oh, well, that's not true about me then. Oh, well, that's not true about me then. And it's almost like it's coming from the rejection from this person or of this situation. Because again, see the intro, but I'm reading for a very large audience here, potentially. So for some of you, this will be a direct romantic rejection. And for many others, it will be that you felt that you were going to get something and then that thing never happened. And now your self-concept and your estimation of your own character is deeply affected by that, even if the outcome of getting the thing wasn't that high stakes, or you're not really that fussed, right? So you may come at me with this once you realize what it is and be like, it's not that deep, right? But it's kind of not about that. It's about what not having that impressed upon you about yourself, whether intentionally or not. And for many of us, we have these biases about ourselves already built in, and it just takes the right person or situation to say, oh, actually, that's a no. And suddenly we're sort of falling back on assumptions about the self, which often come from, you know, childhood dynamics, relationship trauma, sometimes physical or life trauma, making the brain work a different way. You do you, boo, right? And I say that as someone who's got it all, right? Yeah, you're in the right place. This is kind of trauma bingo on this channel. It's fine. Okay, so firstly, there is a suggestion, if this is romantic, with this virtue reversed or the Three of Wands reversed, that one of the values that you would have liked to have brought forward in this connection or this bargain or whatever it was the maintaining of a certain level of virtue in order to speak to the character of the thing. I'm not talking about really misogynistic ideas of purity, like sort of Madonna whore, disposable people, not disposable people kind of dynamics. I'm fairly sick of that coming up in readings, to be quite honest. I'm more speaking to recognizing that something is so far so aligned with your value system and so special and kind of significant to you with all of this green and the coins in the air, that you would be prepared to go about things in a different way in order to maintain that specialness for as long as possible. So when we're talking about a relationship, I do mean things like having a longer talking stage or a longer dating stage than you might normally do before getting jiggy, right? Or if it's something to do with solidifying a friendship connection or like an alliance of some kind, this would be, again, going about things in a more steady way so as to really get to know each other. It's coming through, so I have to say it. For one or two of you, and it won't be the majority, there is some kind of energy around this of like the potential for an emotional affair, hence the detective work, hence the secrecy. And it's like, on the one hand, you guys were taking things steady because it was special and you genuinely wanted to get to know each other in a way that didn't kind of sully anything or create any damage before you were sure. But then on the other hand, it wasn't just to preserve it, it was also to not be doing anything wrong. Again, depends on your definition of cheating, I'm not here to judge. But it was kind of like, let's pace it, not just to keep it this kind of special new blossoming thing, and cultivate it, you know, like I'm getting like a bonsai in my head, but also to maybe protect it against the acceleration of a certain relationship where you can't go back, or a relationship which would then immediately receive the judgments of other people, which might weigh into what the outcome is, right? Because in a very delicate dynamic like that, if anybody gets wind of it before you guys are sure what's really happening, it could be an absolute tragedy for everybody concerned. So again, for some, not for all, but it's coming up in the energy. There is a negation of this virtue that happens at a certain point. The Three of Wands is usually a turning point or an expansion energy anyway, that sort of brings in an element of chaos. It can be an element of creation. So again, small number, but for some of you, there may even be a pregnancy involved somewhere in this. But if you don't already know that, it was designed as confirmation, so it's not you, right? But as well as creative, it is chaotic, right? Because it's wands, it's spiritedness, it's passion coming in. It's being fired up about something to the extent that it gains so much momentum, it kind of carries on rolling down the hill, even if you're chasing it, yelling, stop, stop, right? So again, I think that speaks to those of you who were perhaps in a very delicate situation where you wanted to keep a certain pace for a reason. But then also, it seems like what I'm getting is that maybe from one end, possibly your end, I don't know, there was somebody who wanted to preserve this integrity of it and just explore it in a sort of very chaste, very innocent, very sweet way. Or perhaps even from like a backing off intellectual perspective that judged it on value bases. You know, does it check this box? Will it set me up in a few years, which is sort of coming up in a couple of places. Sorry, I meant to point to that one then. But it's like there was this distance and there was this structure that one person had in mind. And I think the other person either didn't or didn't understand that that's what was at play. So there is already coming in, before we get into the rest, a misinterpretation from one party of what the other party is trying to do and why, which from their end could be perceived as a rejection, right? Because not all people, when told, let's go slow, let's hang back, let's figure out where we stand with this, not all of them are going to have the life experiences that make that a positive message, that make that a safe place to be. For many people, and certainly for particular attachment styles, that is immediately like a warning of like, oh, they're backing off, they're going off me. You know, that they're saying, let's slow it down, and I don't understand that. Maybe they're just not into it, right? So there's like that misunderstanding, and that sort of came up in a recent love reading. So if you've been watching recently and this has turned up and you've watched that one, this is your confirmation in the right spot, right? But I feel like it's not that the virtue was necessarily taken away. It's not that this thing isn't right for both parties' value systems. It's that one person wanted to be more quote unquote virtuous about going forward with this than another person did. And that was misrepresented or misinterpreted. You sort of, reflect on that one. And for some reason, it did start to accelerate faster than this more cautious party would have wanted. Be that sexually, be that in terms of like how much you guys were meeting up, or who knew about the fact that you were getting closer or that you were working on this project or whatever it is, right? But it started to build that momentum that you then can't stop. The other thing that I was getting from the Cranberries song initially was that, what was the lyric now? It was something like, didn't you see me? Didn't you hear me? Didn't you see me standing there? Why did you turn out the lights? Did you know that I was sleeping? So there's a momentum, and then there's one person kind of standing there going, hey, kind of waving, doing semaphore, shouting at the other person to recognize that the pace of this is speeding out of control. And then it's like, as soon as they've tried to express that, the lights go out, and then empty kicks in, right? The chorus of the song. So that, again, it's like this acceleration, not to an unreasonable level, but past the point that at least one party feels comfortable with. And then that moving into like, I lost what I was trying to do with this then. So even if we're not talking an acceleration of like consenting sexual contact faster than we would normally do, or if we're not talking something moving out of control in terms of the reputation of it or anything like that, we are definitely speaking on somebody feeling that they had a very fixed way of going about things, and that potentially not moving forward in that it feels like a kind of betrayal, right? Or it feels like, because of the speed of this, it shows me that you didn't understand what this was. That's what I'm getting at. Then we move into, so we've lost the virtue, right? And again, this may be something that one turns inward on oneself, and that could be you feeling like, I plan to do this in a virtuous way. Am I without virtue for not going about it in that manner because of, you know, the temptation of the other person or whatever? It could equally be them, particularly if there was any kind of conflict about like, this is moving too fast, or I don't like the way that this happened, or I don't like, for some of you, a third party thing, a literal triangle, right? A 3. It, again, general audience, but it's like whichever side has turned that sense of the virtue is absent from this back in on themselves in some way. Then we have wealth reversed, right? 10 of discs, 10 of coins. This is about building a legacy, and here we have like planetary Kabbalistic correspondences and sigils. So again, this is it's less speaking to material wealth to me, despite the coins everywhere, and more to a progression, a legacy, a moving up the tree, or indeed down the tree. Interesting that I was called to pull from the angelic deck today as well, because, you know, if you're looking at the tree of life, you're looking at the path of the Archangel Michael or the path of his sword. And it feels like that. It's like a route through something. Side note that I'm getting as a channeled, I've been rereading House of Leaves today because it's just what I do whenever I can, because I'm really sad about it. But again, there's that thing, without spoiling too much there, of moving through a labyrinth, but finding that the environment that you are moving through on a set path is constantly changing, constantly going back on itself, constantly reinforcing different structures to what you expected, so that finding your way home in the dark becomes this difficult thing. So if one of you or both of you had in mind a long-term kind of a project, whether it be a business venture that affected your coin, or whether it was a relationship, I feel that it would have been impossible to go forward on the specific trajectory you were on anyway, and make these sideways moves and go in a diagonal here and a straight line there. But again, the fact that it hasn't worked out that way is being perceived by one or both parties as a negation of wealth, as a lack of abundance, as a reason not to trust in the universe in a much broader way, right? And we're not just talking trust in terms of fidelity here, we're talking trusting in spirit to guarantee that what it maybe predicts for you or encourages for you actually happens. And I feel that for many watching, this was a big deal and it didn't happen, and you were almost kind of told at some point on the journey that it would, and that's what stings for you, because we are getting all these spiritual symbols. So there's almost like, I mean, it's not really present as much in the thought, but there's like a crisis of faith energy here as well. And I mean, it's Hermes, it's the trickster, right? It's, again, with that House of Leaves shifting labyrinth vibe of, you thought you knew where you were going, but you didn't turn your coat inside out, so I'm going to fuck it up for you, you know? I hope that people are getting that reference if they're from a magical background. If you're not, just ignore that, but it's to say that this was a tricky journey anyway. This was a delicate path. This was walking between circumstances that you knew would be shifting around for both of you, maybe even in a locational sense for some, and finding that the way that you wanted to go about this could not be done, either through a direct rejection from this other person, or just that you both tried and it didn't work the way it was supposed to, or something else kind of intersected or impeded that trajectory, in the sense of like a wall sliding in or a door appearing in a place where there shouldn't have been a door, etc. For those who haven't read House of Leaves, if you've seen Skinamarink, again, I don't want to spoil too much, but the way that the environment shifts is also a good visual analogy for what this is like, right? It's the way that you intended to go betraying you itself, or the feeling of that, even if actually the only betrayal was from somebody else, or even if there was no betrayal and it was just that you couldn't travel the same way because you were learning different lessons and doing different things. There is a sense of like, how dare that window or door appear there or vanish altogether, when I was so sure, right? This is lack of trust in no longer being sure about things. Then we have the Tower. I think that's really fairly straightforward here. I think we came to a kind of climax moment in all this. And for many of you, dancing or the movie climax will be relevant. But it was a kind of everything comes crashing down in one short sequence, one crisis point. And I think that may have been a verbal rejection from this person just because of some of the stuff I was picking up earlier. Now, when I say the film climax, something that's really unique about that is the mid-movie credit sequence. I mean, Gaspar Noé's credit sequences are always banging, but particularly this chaotic imagery on here reminds me of that. And when I heard the word climax in my head, that's what I thought. So yes, there may have been a consummation and that kind of stuff here, but equally there is a point halfway through the movie that you were in when it was like, right, now we open, and it's onto a different thing than what you thought, right? Now the drinks at the party are spiked. Now everyone's kind of going haywire from this moment, and it's an elated moment within the film, but then we descend into this kind of Dante's Inferno, and again with the House of Leaves stuff, of like, this is how badly this can go. We've gone from enjoyment, creativity, collaboration, jubilation, aligned values, into something that is so chaotic that the structure of the thing again is bent, and that there's kind of so much going on, and the way that people are seeing things is very different, very changeable. This dragon energy here in the background, I don't know enough about this deck to know what that signifies in kind of Kabbalistic terms. Maybe my fellow mites can help me with that below. But what I do know in terms of the archetypal dragon or snake energy is that sort of shifting movement, right? It's like, maybe if you did want to take a certain path of the sword, the whole thing's just kind of swerved and slithered out of your grasp in a way. So again, we've got a mid-reading credit sequence saying, actually, we're doing this with this loud thumping, aggressive kind of music. And that may have shaken you up if you were at this very steady pace and you had kind of an idea of where it was that you were going, and then suddenly it's a no. I think whether this was an atmosphere or whether it was a statement, it was brought about in the statement by the other person, or even by you, by that atmospheric shift first. So whatever was said was a direct result of changes to the environment. And if you were in a third party of any kind, take that as you will, right? That will again be a confirmation of maybe things that were influential going on. And then we're sort of at the Lovers reversed, which I think, you know, this card can be a lot deeper, but it's fairly straightforward in this, right? It's thwarted opportunity in that romantic sense in this case. But I also want to go deeper with it in a moment, because this whole reading is talking about you. You cannot control the other person. And again, this is a similar vibe to some of the other love readings we've had recently. But what's kind of unique in this one is not just the thing of self-examination, and I can't think what it was called, but I did a really recent reading on like a soul contract with someone, and the fact that that could be just as negative as it is positive. So that may be relevant, but there is also a unification of self in this that is completely not to do with the other party. This isn't just about reconciling who they are to you in your head and figuring out what went on. This is about you coming to agreement with you within yourself and saying, actually, both sides of that crazy credit sequence are not acceptable morally, but are valid, and are things that I need to integrate into the self. You could even argue with the movie, and it's a very extreme horror, guys, so if you're not into that, don't watch it, but you could say that maybe the point of the interviews and things leading up to that dance sequence is like the good side of the psyche, or the side that is more readily performed. And then everything that happens after that, once the party goes out of control and people start to be very damaged, that is like the shadow self trying to break through. And I think there is a calling to bring both of these things in at the moment and to examine both. Like we said with the detective with two sides, right? the light has gone out, right? That is essentially what we were talking about. It's almost as if the trajectory of this relationship, partnership, collaboration was the thing that lit your way, and was kind of taken for granted to a certain extent by you or by the other party, depending on who you are watching. But there is a caution against like the entitlement to that particular lantern through the dark. There is, I'm not saying that Spirit put this in your path to whoop your ass, because I don't like that. I don't like everything's a lesson, no matter how cruel and awful. But I am saying that there is some self-examination to be done around what it is that you own, right? Both in terms of what you are entitled to have in your future, that is perhaps also to do with other people's futures, and also what you own about that situation. Are you owning this? Are you owning your own manifestation? Are you living in the integration of, this happened, I understand why, I understand what it is in myself that it brings to the fore for healing, and I'm ready to move forward in a pretty okay way, right? Because that's where we want to get. I'm going to go to the side cards and I'm going to carry on down here. In fact, no, let's go to the angel first, right? Okay, so I'm going to use the book for this, just because my archangelic knowledge is enhanced thoroughly by some of the synchronicities in this. So we've got Mahasya, God the Saviour. Rectification helps one live in peace with everyone. And then it says it's Psalm 34, but this book can be wrong, so my Christians, hit me up down below with whether that's accurate, but it is, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all my fears. And this is choir of seraphim, so big hitter, right? The person born under Mahasya learns all that they desire with ease, has an attractive face and character, and is happy with honest pleasures. If that vibes more as this other person than you might want to check the recent reading where the thumbnail had the word fuckboy in it, right? Just saying. Because it may illuminate some stuff, but only if you resonate with that. Mahasya helps you to live in peace with the entire world. Relevant times and dates, so to this tower moment perhaps, or to a first meeting, could be 1:20 a.m. to 1:40 a.m. Again, poetic vibes, right? And the 24th of March, 4th of June, 15th of August, 26th of October, or 6th of January. And additionally, the 9th to the 13th of April, but that's in a more sort of physical sense. So if any of those numbers or dates resonate, that is why. But my feeling on this was like, I sought the Lord and he heard me and delivered me from all of my fears. It came up in reverse, right? So there's the emphasis on examining those fears and on maybe the shadow of the card in some fashion. I'm not as interested in like what this is in the tarot, to be honest. 4 of Wands again is like a progression from that third, but 4 of Wands in reverse is just kind of a lack of stability, a lack of being able to build something with someone, which is again fairly straightforward, right? It's the Lovers reversed, similar vibe. Let's put this light back on for you. Excuse me. There we go. My feeling is that a lot of this was not so that you could deal with relationship fears, but that the way that it can be looked at from this kind of eagle-eyed archangelic perspective of, in the end, gratitude being the healing energy to entitlement, is that without this tower, you would not know what it is that you were afraid of in having such a specific structure prior to it. So if you were the person who had a progression through this relationship or connection or whatever that was very planned out, and you needed to check off that someone had particular characteristics to do with your personal value system, or even that they had a certain financial standing in order that you would go to the next stage, or in order that you would like interrupt virtue with spontaneity, which is more of a Wands energy, that is all there to kind of tell you what you were so afraid of by the event of it almost happening. And I'm not saying if like there were hidden fears behind this that you know, the outcomes of those things were never confirmed. I'm not saying that those things did happen. What I am saying is that if they were on your mind through all this and you behaved in a certain way towards a person that otherwise you would want to be more free, more open with, then this is your station to examine those particular trains. Yeah, is there another way I want to say that, Spirit? I feel really that there's a lot of kind of like earth fixed, we will do this in this way, stuff coming through this reading, right? But actually there's also a lot of like, spin the wheel, motherfuckers. Oh, climax, completely random credit sequence, childlike joy, really mixed messaging over here, archangelic, creative, passionate. So it's almost like there is an internal war in the energies of this reading between structure, boundary, and doing things in a certain traditional way, or at least traditional for you, for your defense mechanisms, versus just trusting like a child that this will be okay. And if you're seeing it and you were the person who wanted to preserve the virtue of this, that speaks to that childlike energy. Excuse me, hiccups, confirmation. But it also, I think that childlike energy, it wasn't actually that you wanted to preserve innocence necessarily, because then you get into the questions of like, what is the opposite of innocence? And did you really think that that person embodied the opposite energy, and were you trying to prevent that? And I don't think that's a full yes, right? I think instead innocence is associated with childlike freedoms, and you can risk getting into childish with the childlike. So if you are someone who has had to be guarded for any reason, or who has had relationships where not going through a certain structure has meant that you got shafted, literally, again, literally or figuratively, then I think it's maybe like a preservation thing that comes from a childlike space where you would want to be able to be childlike without being childish, or you would want the other person to be able to be childlike with you and kind of walk through this William Blake Garden of Innocence stuff experientially in the romance of it all, in the enthrallment of the situation, without verging into the childish, which includes, by the way, and you know, hit me up in the comments if these are any of your fears, tantrum behaviour, entitlement behaviour, fuckboy prince type stuff, you know, king baby, anything kind of to do with the unpredictable being a little bit dangerous. So read like the threat of violence being potentially in your past, or having emotionally unstable people around and feeling that to kind of tell the full truth of a situation risks rattling them. Again, sort of poking the Minotaur, right, from this one. Any of these kinds of things could put one in a space where at a subconscious level they don't believe that it's safe to be childlike with somebody. But I'm guessing from this connection and how kind of pure it began and how much it was based on shared values, that actually your deepest drive, at least at your end in this, was to be able to trust enough that you could open up like a child would, to be playful, to be spontaneous, to be creative, to be romantic, to be free to express in any particular way you saw fit in the moment, in a way that makes you both inspired and laughing and kind of working together in a really unique way that turns that dragon energy into something wonderful. You know, it's going from the slithering into kind of luck dragon, never ending story energy. So there's all of this going on, and then there's like the pull to this childlike trust, really, which is, you know, trust in the Lord type stuff, whether or not you're Christian, whether that rubs you back up. You know, all denominations and all beliefs here, everyone's welcome, but it's a metaphor, right? But I think I think you wanted to trust, right? You wanted to just be able to fully be yourself. You might be someone who's quite tired of relationships where you can't, in any capacity, platonic or otherwise. You may do a lot of editing of specific behaviours without even consciously registering anymore that you have to. And I think that that is why you had a set path through the dark. And I think that is also why the real gift of this is that it moved the walls as you were travelling. And you hated it. You hated this person maybe for it. And again, like I said, you internalized that, right? So we haven't maintained the virtue. I am not virtuous. We haven't maintained the wealth and abundance and certainty. I am not wealthy. I am not abundant. I am not certain of the future. Pay particular attention to that one if you've been watching a lot of tarot, right? Or going for a lot of divination methods. And then with this tower, it's, you know, we came to a crisis point. I am a crisis point. We came to unpredictability together. I am unpredictable. And I think for many of you, that is the statement that will hit the worst in terms of self-concept. There is a free self-concept reading on this channel, by the way. If you want me to do another, like with more piles and stuff, hit me up in the comments. Happy to. It's actually one of my favourites. But for me, one of the crucial self-concepts here for either party is this became unpredictable, so I am unpredictable. And then at the root of all of these kinds of internalizations is I am unlovable. I am not unified within myself. I don't love myself. I don't respect myself. Because how could you if you think that somebody else's rejection of you is any kind of measure of your internal character? This Wheel of Fortune reversed. This is not recognizing the gift of this wheel here, of this sigil, of this seraphim energy coming in. It's also you not being sure of the future in the light of this not working out. And again, as I said here, you know, these are kind of echoing each other where it was like, yeah, it may only have been a relationship, it may only have been a friendship, a partnership, a collaboration, whatever, right? But to you, it was the thing keeping you going in some senses or in some facets of life, or it was the promise at the end of a rainbow. And for that to not happen is like somebody putting a spoke in the Wheel of Fortune, right? Or a turning of the wheel that you interpret as cruelty, divine cruelty, perhaps. Because there's a lot of that in this particular deck's energy, right? I mean, many of you know the history around the creator or co-creator of this deck. He was quite the figure. Some people love him, some people hate him. And I think that's coming through, right? That blessing curse dichotomy of like, is the divine, is the cosmic arrangement in fact on my side? Or is it, when taken to its extreme, this abhorrent or nihilistic, what's the word? This unfeeling thing. And that's the vibe of the song as well. Empty, right? Literally. But again, I'll post the video down below so that you can take a look at the lyrics, because pretty much all of them fit this. Moving back over here, because I said I would. You're so deeply nurturing and it makes me feel safe. This could be either one of you to the other, or this could be how you felt about the world before this. And like when I say that, many of you will be like, I'm not that much of a simp, right? But these things can hit hard, right? At a subconscious psychological level, you can not be as invested in a thing, but it can still make you feel very unsafe in the world to have it not go the way that was expected, particularly if you were trying to tap into a childlike trust by engaging with it at all in the first place. And then, I love you, but I don't love how you're acting right now. I feel this could be you to them or them to you. This may even have been something they said to you in this cutting off when things became more chaotic, because they didn't understand this pacing thing. They didn't understand doing the set path. They perhaps embody a more spontaneous energy and therefore saw your lack of spontaneity as either something that was designed to ensnare them if they're quite avoidant, or as an undesirable quality in somebody else. And again, that's not true of you, but it may be that this person, if they've been kind of particularly used to getting their way or traveling their own direction through things, having somebody say, no, you can't do that, this is the way things are done, for the first time, it can really get to somebody, right? So honestly, it's difficult for me to read the energy for all of you, for whether like actually you were being a bit structurally extreme with this, or whether it's on the flip side and this person is so overly spontaneous that it would tip into recklessness, and that you were the first person to tell them no. And again, whether you resonate with my recent love readings will also clarify that, because many of them kind of talk about that more brattish end of that dynamic, but you do you. Narcissistic traits don't make me a full-on narcissist. Again, this could be you to them or them to you, or both. Right? Because whenever we have someone with an internal plan that's willing to do detective work on another person, if they say, your plan makes me harumphed, I'm out, you have somebody who's seeking a little bit of control in the relationship. And that can come across narcissistically, even if you don't have any narcissistic characteristics, qualities, or diagnoses. Equally, somebody at the other end saying, I don't like the way that you're leading this because I'm not used to being led. I want this to go the way that it always goes, which is my way. That can come across as very kind of overtly narcissistic. So we've got like grandiose traits at the one end and possible covert traits at the other. But it doesn't mean that either party is actually a narcissist. It just means that, you know, you're both looking for control over your own stuff in very different ways, but that grasping for control itself is what makes you seem to the other person like you're not trustworthy, when the tragedy is, my dude, both of you were looking to trust the other. That's what happened here, right? And if you do want to go forward with any kind of dialogue with this person, because we do have a blue here, I would advise that you lead from a point where you say, I think I was trying to trust you and you were trying to trust me, and we went about that differently, right? Because there's a mutual attempt to work together. There's a mutual attempt at trusting in each other and in circumstance. There are shared values. There is enough of the shared value to indicate the potential for legacy, you know, be that a longer relationship or like a full familial legacy, depending on where you are with what you want. And yet, right, we have all these kind of mixing up, countering each other energies to the point where it's like 3 strikes and you're out. And then we can't sort of say from this particular reading what the other person was feeling. I'm hearing yes we can, so maybe that'll come up in the ink. But from your end, there is this like, oh, maybe I'm not cut out for relationships right now, or maybe I'm not unified in what I want, or maybe I need to integrate more in terms of the shadow, or maybe I don't trust in, you know, big G, universe, whatever it is that you call that, the force, right? And there is a loss of faith here happening, certainly at your end. I'm not sure it's happening at theirs, because I think that their approach to this was very much like 3 strikes, I have a strop, and then I go about my chaotic stuff. And when I say chaotic, I don't mean it as a negative, by the way. It may be that this person's spontaneity is what drew you in, because it's something that's required in your own life. But I think like because they are used to diverging paths, bumps in the road, changing direction very suddenly, just as like nature of their own adaptability, I don't think they took this as hard as you yet. Or if they did, I think they took it hard in a different way. I don't necessarily think that for this person, they saw this as a reflection on like whether God is on their side, or whether divination had been lying to them, or whether in fact they can't manifest, or any of these big issues that you're looking at in terms of turning this blade on yourself. I think instead they were likely to mourn it, but in a sense of like, well, it sucks that this person isn't what I thought they were, or it sucks that this couldn't work out because there were this many things in the way, but, you know, I'm going to go and adapt again because adapting is what I do. And when I say that, I speak about myself, and as a person who adapts a lot, trust me when I say we don't always want to be that adaptive figure, right? The trickster isn't always someone who's happy to be the trickster. Sometimes it's just that you've had so much stuff happen that you learn to swerve and kind of almost like have a freeze response or a dissociation around that swerving. So for this person, they have normalized, okay, on to the next. But that's not indicative of a dismissal of the connection. It's that this person has to swerve to keep going, right? And I'm seeing kind of cars trying to bump each other off the road. Again, the recent reading about a conflict within a dynamic may be relevant. I believe the thumbnail said something like they sold out, ? But it might hit home, it might not, you do you. Okay, so coming to the Gelfling cards, and I say that because it's a Jim Henson mega deck, it's a DIY effort, but we've picked 2 Dark Crystal cards here. So we've got Kira, which I think is the more sort of feminine energy of this, whether or not that's a bit compet, see the intro, right? But the receiving energy, the person who would, I guess, be pursued, although that's not a great word. So Kira is a Topper Land Strider, so we're talking about air, we're talking about swords, we're also talking about that momentum, potentially speeding out of control, right? For those of you who've seen the film, you don't want to be riding a Land Strider too fast, you will fall off it. It's like a horse on stilts, right? So again, there's this like acceleration that she is cautious of, but there is this, I think for many of you, you are this yin energy because there is a impression from Kira of like, I am steering this ship. I have the bridle to this Land Strider, right? And with Queen of Swords, this is often about boundaries or delineation, or again, the imposition of structure. It's quite Saturnian, but in the light, or Saturnian in a sort of mild flavour of Saturn, not full soup. And I think this speaks to, again, putting in boundaries to retain what this person felt was the virtue of a particular progression. But with it being the Queen of Swords, the other flip side of the Queen is that she can be interpreted by others as martial, so like overly competitive about the way things are done. She can separate concepts to the extent that like the sort of abstraction of those things is rendered meaningless. So look at things like if someone's being romantic, taking the structure of romance apart to the extent that it's no longer a romantic gesture, that kind of thing. Again, just an example, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but it's like having a logical delineation of everything. Also, she can come across as being kind of a hard taskmaster, or too hardlined about things, or in some cases, she can come across as elitist. And again, for some of you, I feel this was an accusation levelled at you when things for both of you didn't go to plan, and this person was just like, listen, everything's chaotic, I don't know what's happening here, but I want out, right? And they cut this off. Now the 8 over here, the 8 of Cups, is really interesting because we've got Kira again, but she's in this ideal family setup, and what a wonderful little family they are. Her, Jen, and their darling daughter or son, Fizzgig. I think son, not sure. They're non-binary Fizzgig, shall we say. And it's this beautiful dynamic that, I mean, Kira's got a hand on her heart here, so she's been dreaming about this, right? So for some of you, you will have had family in mind. For others, this is just a representation of, I felt that this person was on my team and I could see some kind of future in cooperation with them. And I'm hearing that Scott Pilgrim thing of like, did you see a future with Ramona? And he says, with jetpacks, right? So this is really far future, again, speaking to this. But the Eight of Cups is about walking away from something. So we have two interpretations, my dudes. On the one hand, for those of you who identified with a third-party situation, there is a requirement for one or the other person to walk away from an established emotional structure in order to get to this familial dynamic. And whether or not they do that is in the end up to them, right? If you didn't identify with the third-party thing, this is about emotionally moving away from what your idea of this was, what your kind of concept of a 10 of Cups of a white picket fence scenario is for you, outside of compare, outside of it must be this way, outside even of monogamy if that's not your bag. But, you know, for you, what was the highest point of this connection, collaboration, project, etc.? And emotionally, from what you've gained from this reading, how is it that you are kind of shattering that for yourself, or realizing that in order to move towards it, perhaps with a different person, you need to deconstruct it somewhat or figure out why it was that you wanted it to look that way? Because it's not just the idea of being loved, it's a very specific interpretation of that journey. And I think that that warrants further investigation. To return to the detective archetype on the segue of that word, this Eight of Cups, if it is about somebody walking away from someone else, could be the reason that one or the other parties are doing a bit of detective work, doing a bit of stalking, doing a bit of underhandedness, maybe finding out from a third party to the third party what the deal is there, or, you know, taking a look at a profile that is either blocked or not joined up anymore, or watching someone's stories, or kind of silently lurking in some way. And if you're doing that again, I'm not saying don't do it, right? Because some of us are on twin flame journeys, and believe you me, I understand the need to hold out hope and keep that person in your phone or whatever. But there is a difference between that and constantly checking in with something. And there is also a difference between that and the active invasion of somebody else's privacy in order to secure one's own personal sense of security when it's being damaged because things are no longer certain or things don't feel set in stone. Remember that this Queen, being about boundaries and everything, and being on a land strider, can also speak to somebody who is perceived as striding over somebody else's boundaries, somebody else's private relationships, somebody else's preferred structures. So whether or not this speaks to you, there is indication that for the other party to this Kira figure, they feel that their boundaries, their thresholds have been broken, imposed upon, or that something is being done without their consent. Or they would feel that if they knew what detective work is going on here, right? So it's a caution if you're a part of that. And believe me, I've been there, I've done it. There's some shady stuff in my past in terms of kind of watching other people's next moves as a result of trauma. But what I will say is that if you're going through that, examine these internalizations that you've put in your self-concept and why you feel so desperate to know for certain in any direction that you would break the boundary of a person that you presumably respect in order to seek certain information, rather than perhaps either stepping forward for a reconciliation energy, or if that's not possible, just ensuring that all aspects of yourself that were informed by these fears are coming up for healing and for nurturing, right? Because this is you to you as well. My feeling with a lot of these sort of connection readings is that usually you have at least one person who wants to be nurtured, loved, but also soothed, right? Because we all carry baggage with us. And if you know that some of this was because you were desperate to be comforted, to be nurtured, then that void is the thing to work on and not the path that you travelled through it with this particular individual, right? Because that may be up for being mended, it may not. But again, the gift of this through this archangel, or through this seraphim, sorry, is to put a spanner in the works of what you thought was your fortune, what you thought was your next step, in order to show you where your opportunities actually lie. This is ruled by Jupiter in this deck, right? Expansion, new philosophies, new horizons, gaining knowledge on a particular thing, going beyond what it is that we were ready to deal with prior to a particular opportunity or situation. We're going to end card-wise with blue shade and then get on to some ink divination. But blue shade, again, communication is coming up very heavy in this reading. That may be a next step for you, or it may be that doing some therapeutic work around what you would want to say to this person, or what you wish you had said, or what you wish you hadn't said. Excuse me, confirmation. In terms of journaling and stuff, would be a really good next step. For my manifestors, for my law of assumption people, you know the kind of self-concept path forward from these sorts of fears, right? You know your Neville, etc. You know kind of what to do with this information. But I would say also go down the route of using your throat chakra energy to do that. So if you're more of a scripter, do that. It's communication, but do it as a letter writing thing. Or if you like to say mantras or affirmations out loud, the throat is important here. Literally saying your piece to nobody is important, as is monitoring the words you say for when they confirm or deny your assumptions about yourself that you cannot know this other person feels, right? Because we're not mind readers here, and I recently did a reading on not trying to mind read somebody after a difficult dynamic, okay? So I hope that that bit was useful. If you want to part ways here because it was a long one, then by all means do, but please check out the channel in future. Please like, subscribe, ding the dong. Thank you kindly. And let me know if in the comments if it was helpful, because that really helps me to get known algorithmically and continue to serve other people. But if this is not where we part ways and you're feeling especially exciting and fruity today, then today's extra divination method is something we've seen before on the channel but never in this format, which is ink in saltwater divination. Okay, so I'm actually just gonna pop a light on so that we've got a better picture of this particular thing. Can we have that a bit dimmer? Yeah, there we go. Right, so I should say as well that with that blue shade, this is clearly not for the people who left a second ago, but blue shade is very yin, right? So if that blue stuff really hit home, shade is added black, meaning added feminine in my personal copyrighted system. Emphasis on copyrighted because there's been some funny things going on with the channel. And therefore, like, it is that communication dynamic, but it's also particularly if you identified in the Kira Queen of Swords energy, it's like use that swordsy, airy energy, use that communication for the good. Even if you're only communicating with the gods, the spirits, or yourself as Godhead, depending on what you believe. Now, I bring up colour because we got yellow ochre for our ink for the day. I think the last reading was with blue ink, ironically, but yellow ochre speaks to me of the continuation of this self-concept theme because it talks about the solar plexus chakra, but also that chakra explores gratitude versus entitlement, which we referred to elsewhere. It's also very solar, right? So I don't know whether you're dealing with a masculine energy or it's more about, again, we've got lots of references to light and illumination and sort of growing within the light of something or stepping into a brighter time. So all of those kind of solar themes are relevant. And the sun in true astrology, not pop astrology, speaks to the kind of personal mission, the individuated hero's journey, as it aspects to the rest of the chart quite specifically. So it's not, you are a Pisces, your hero's journey is XYZ, the end. It's very much a dynamic over 360 degrees of possibilities intersecting with other things. So do look at where your sun is in your chart, where this other person's sun is if you know their chart. Again, no stalky means if you don't, right? Because we were talking about that astrological detective work. And I'm hearing for some of you, don't do rectification if you don't know for certain. So that's just for my astrologers, hey. But there's something here about solar aspects, or indeed a solar return. Right. Oh, yellow ochre. Let's go. Give me some of that Backrooms House of Leaves energy, which is also yellow, right? Ooh, did you see that? Okay, so the salt went into the water a long time before this, and that meant that when that dropped in, I hope you did see it, because it kind of dispersed before it was a thing. So there is a feeling here that this was cancelled out as a connection before it even had a chance to establish straight away. And then this configuration down here, bearing in mind we've got lots of dark crystal stuff today, this looks like the gathering of the Uru when they're sending Jen off on his quest. So again, hero's journey stuff. But if you haven't seen the dark crystal, it might be a scary kids movie with a load of puppets, right? And it might be really ridiculous in places, particularly to younger eyes, because it was made in the 70s. But it does hold in it a lot of wisdom, a great deal of archetypal stuff going on there, astrological stuff going on there, different kind of mystic disciplines from around the world being referenced in really minor ways. The guy who designed all the figures for it was like a fairy channel. It's just a very odd history. So I'm being called to say, if you don't know what I mean by the gathering of the Uru, go and watch The Dark Crystal, even if you have to do so and never tell anyone for, you know, not being cringe or whatever it is now. But go and do it, because there is extra information here. Ooh. Okay, so that started in a kind of mushroom shape, so that might be relevant somehow. You might be a chef, or you might have done mushrooms with this person. But I don't know whether you sort of expanded to this kind of like long-haired feminine figure that I'm seeing. It makes me think of Ponyo, where they meet the goddess of the ocean, right? So oceans, surfing, goddess work, mermaids may be relevant to some of you. Or things kind of being bigger than they seem, particularly with relation to Piscean energy. Now there's a person grasping at that, but I don't know whether you can see it's kind of moving out of mode fast, but it's like a magician card or a priest energy, grasping at that goddess value, but then also with one hand as a conductor to the earth. I'm hearing in my head the Zakk Wylde, well, the Book of Shadows song, Somewhere Between Heaven and Hell, right? Or is it Pride and Glory? Anyways, it's Zakk Wylde back when he was a cowboy and not a bearded biker. Great era, by the way, if you're into him. But it's this thing of being a channel, as above, so below. But also in a greater sense, it's like trying to channel the spiritual validity of a connection into a practical mechanism or a practical set of ways. And again, because of all the chaos down here that I didn't get to read, I feel that's like being unsuccessful. But it may be that you saw yourself, if this is like a soul dynamic, well, all dynamics are soul dynamics. Sorry, Althea, I'm going to have to help you out there, sorry. It may be that you saw yourself in a soul connection as being a kind of sacred conduit for the potential of the connection into its earthly form. What you're being asked to examine with that is the extent to which you are more qualified than this other person to do that. Because for some of you, Spirit is saying yes, and for others of you, Spirit is saying, why is it that you think you know more than this other person to dictate how this is going to go when it's earthbound or when it's brought down to this kind of material manifestation level? Like, what is it? For some of you, what is it about your belief system? But for others of you, what is it about that solar plexus entitlement energy that makes you think that it was your job to take it from the concept you saw it as into a very specific material thing? And I'm not saying that to trigger anybody. I'm saying it because once you can recognize that mistakes were made in a particular energy, that's when you can draw somebody back in. That's where you can genuinely heal fractures in the connection or even in yourself, right? It's when the good shit starts to happen. It's just that at first it might look like baby diarrhea in water, as this ink is turning out to look. It might be a shitty situation that you have to alchemize into gold, right? And this is the colour of kind of both. I'm seeing people dancing again, people partying, so another hit on the climax energy. For those who do want to watch that and are tolerant of extreme horror, trigger warning for SA and violence and plenty of other things in there. But it is a good film. I say that as a fan. There is also a ghost here. So I don't know whether someone was ghosted, or I'm getting the name Casper for some of you, or because of my personal associations, the name Oscar might be relevant. Hi if you're watching, Glow Boy. Love you lots. There's also like a Snow White crone kind of figure down here, which makes me think again of that offering of the apple that isn't quite what it seems. Now, is that a third party thing, or is that in this? Both. Well, that's helpful, thanks. What is it about? Okay. Hold up a sec, guys. Sorry, I'm just channeling. Okay, right. This is a wild message, but I'm going to relay it because this is the wavy gravy part of the reading anyway. So I'm being told that for some of you, the offering of the apple to Snow White is relevant for potentially obvious to you reasons, depending on your circumstances. For another set of you, I'm being taken to when I was 7 at Euro Disney on a Snow White ride, utterly terrified of the moment where the hag is illuminated by the lightning and then kind of jumps off the bridge towards the car you're travelling in. And it's all, you know, like paper, and it's all very, I'll put a POV if I remember, it's a wonderful ride. But it's all very kind of traditionally laid out and not very technologically, it's not as advanced as some of the Disney rides, right? It's not even as advanced as like a Pepper's Ghost mechanism, for those in the know. It's very basic kind of shadow puppety type stuff. But for some reason, that bit really scared me. And still to this day, I'm like, ooh, I don't like that. Like, I can take or leave the rest of the ride. I wasn't scared by the infamous Pinocchio ride that terrified other children. But for some reason, it's that. And I think the reason I'm getting that for you is that if you're not the person for whom the offering of the apple as a temptation metaphor, or a Twilight reference for some of you, is a thing, you're being called to look at the way an older female figure in your life has influenced how you receive rejection. Okay? Because I think part of my kind of deep down, shoved down stuff that I couldn't have been aware of as that scared kid was that crone energy for me was quite frightening anyway, or unpredictable female, kind of monstrous feminine type energy. And there's something there about that with you. And again, try the lucky dip of readings on my channel, because there may be something else that kind of brings that to the fore, but I can't remember off the top of my head where we've covered it. It's probably in one of the Marseille minis, but there's an older feminine that is really relevant here that I think you would never necessarily link to the connection, but she's relevant to the way that you process how you see rejection, how you see diverging paths as a problem, or as like a lack of security, and also how you see yourself. Now, because of the way that went in, I'm seeing the communication in arrival. So again, there's this like contact between somebody who sees themselves as very rational and then a person that they perceive as like an alien force or energy, purely because they're operating in polarity to that, and vice versa, right? Because I imagine those like alien squid beings who are kind of outside of time thought that you know, the people coming to greet them were just as weird to them as they were to us, if that makes sense. It's like, sorry, if you haven't seen Arrival, this is gonna be like, what? But there's like a Lovecraftian level of misunderstanding here between like someone who identifies themselves as normal human on home turf, right, as if any of us are, and who sees other things as extraterrestrial, foreign, difficult to interpret, difficult to understand. And that, again, that's on a spectrum from I don't really get this person's communication style, all the way over to like outright xenophobia being involved in the way that this whole thing played out. Again, it doesn't have to be from your end, but it's coming up, so I need to say it, I'm sorry. Let this be the last, okay? I'm seeing a bug here, a fly. Ooh, that's interesting. Wait a sec. And then I'm seeing kind of an Oogie Boogie Man type figure here. So let me just process what that is on a personal level. The ghost is back, by the way. Oh, the ghost is back, right? So for some of you, if you were ghosted, that may be your answer in terms of reconciliation, or whether you're going to meet up or whether you're going to hear from them again. The ghost is literally back. But this kind of fly over one end and Oogie Boogie at the other. I'm just going to... Whoa, oh God, noises. I'm going to kneel down for this one and you can tell me what that's about, universe. Okay, so Oogie Boogie, again, Nightmare Before Christmas reference. Sorry if you haven't seen it, but I will translate. So he's made of bugs, right? And then there's the fly. But why the fly? Why? Okay, separate message, but it's kind of related. If you've been having a lot of insects in your home to an unusual level, or you've had like one particular fly buzzing around you for days and it won't leave and it won't be swatted and it won't go towards the light or whatever, right? There is a message, a spirit message in that for you about either negative energy or, for some, a minority, psychic attack. I'm not saying you're being attacked directly. You're not being cursed. You are not being affected by other magicians, etc. Unless you are of a very advanced magical ilk, it is rare that that happens. What I mean instead is like parasitic, a way that someone emotionally operates in a parasitic fashion, which can be conscious or unconscious and might affect your energy. So this could be, if you're seeing this fly or these bugs or whatever, you might be spending a lot of time with someone you care a lot about, but who is extremely negative in the way that they speak about events. Or you could be with someone who you know is the drama and you kind of can't avoid interactions with them or don't want to assert yourself to avoid them. But you know that that drama is being brought with them, and that it's not good for your energy, and that it's going to affect you, which is why I had that slip there. As in, like, if you are a manifesting or a magical kind of person, watch how the way that other people speak about your situation also factor into what you believe about it, and whether that is in line with the original vision of what it is that you want, whether that's in the past estimation of it or in this kind of re-evaluation of saying. For those of you who've seen The Green Mile, and again, I'm sorry for all the movie references in this one, hit me up down below, by the way, if you're a cinephile, because maybe that's why, but if you've seen The Green Mile, it's like when John Coffey is absorbing not great energy and then he's breathing it out in the form of those flies. That is kind of part of what flies are for me. It's like negative energy leaving the body, and I know that's an injustice to one of God's creatures, and I'm sure there's much more intricate meanings, but for this reading and in this scenario, there's something here about like being careful what you absorb, specifically from sentient beings around you, not necessarily media, not necessarily like general negativity, that old whitewashing new age crap scenario, but specifically people who are pulling a Colin Robinson on what it is that you're trying to achieve. Yeah, be really careful of that shit, particularly because if a ghost is coming back, or if there is some kind of apparition or spirit wanting to work with you, if you weren't ghosted, what you don't want is a space which is not very sort of energetically clean. So keep up your spiritual hygiene, do your salt baths, your sound cleanses, your incense wavings, your smudging with stuff that's not as endangered as sage, your crystal rituals, your candle rituals, your feeding of different animals and entities. You know, you do you for how you do all that. But for whatever practice you do, up it, right? If not in, like, if you're not like moving from one banishing ritual to a bigger one, then up it in frequency in terms of what you do. And if you don't identify with any of that, then you need to look into what magical hygiene actually is. And a good person, well, two good people to go to on this. If you are used to using energy, Jason Miller is good for recommendations on protection magic. If you are more of a kind of new age or just generally spiritual person and you don't identify as an energy worker necessarily, but you like the idea of any of the things I just listed, go to Chromecast at the Rising Moon. Her channel or her podcast has good recommendations for how to clear your energy field of any parasitic leftovers from other people. I feel like a third recommendation is Joe McCarthy through Aquaria, but I think unless you're on the path of the magician or witch or magical worker, some of the stuff that she recommends doing in that is going to be a bit, not advanced, but a bit entangled with other rituals she recommends at same chapters, if that makes sense. So like, look into it by all means. And she may even have a separate book on protection, I can't remember right now. But that is, again, more for my magical collective. And if you are magical, please tell me in the comments. Hi, I want to meet you. All that said, do comment if it was relevant to you, for you, if it was helpful in any way. If you have any personal correspondences with any of the colours, angels, figures, movies, etc. mentioned thus far, I'd love to know. If you enjoyed this particular method of our extra spicy segment, let me know. Do check out the other readings that I've posted more recently, because each time we do a different additional divination method. Please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. Help me to expand in that Jupiterian fashion. And I hope that as you do, your opportunities expand also. Take care.